So my brother just hopped right off the game, so it's time to read a little bit of Genesis. Today we're going to be reading Genesis 37 through 41. Do that off the top of my dome, because this is the third time I'm starting to record this. Okay, Genesis 37, Joseph's dreams. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brother, the son of Bilhah, the son of Zilpah, his father's wives, and had brought their fathers a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in old age, and he made a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream where he told it, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out of the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well, all as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is your dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Joseph sold by his brothers. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers, and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Jacob arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the field and asked him, What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. I heard them say, "Let's go to Dothan." So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he could reach them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come on, let's kill him, and throw him into one of these kisners, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the kisner here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brother, they stripped him of his robe, the richly ornamented robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the kisner. Now the kisner was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were robed with spices, balm, myrrh, and they were on their way to take down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came to buy, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the kisner and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. Let's see how much that is. 8 ounces. So they give him 8 ounces of, I don't know. So they give him 8 ounces of silver to the Ishmaelites. Let's see, I got a computer right here. Let's see how much they sold their brothers for. 8 ounces of silver price or value. That's about $30. Okay. Well, let's see. 20 shekels of silver to dollars. So that's about $5. That's crazy. They sold their own brother for $5. Well, this is just an estimate, so it might not be exactly that, but okay. Let's see. 20 shekels. When Reuben returned to the Kistner and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in blood. Then the ornamented robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "in mourning will I go down to the grave, to my son." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Genesis 38, Judah and Tamar. At that time, Judah left his brother and went down to stay with a man of Adullam, named Hira. There, Judah met the daughter of Canaanite, man named Shua. He married her and lay with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son, who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son named Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kizib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Lie with your brother's wife, and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law, to produce offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he lay with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from producing offspring for his brother. When he did, he was wicked in the Lord's sight, so he put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law, Tamar, "Live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought, he may die too, just like his father's. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shaul, died. While Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to his men, who were shearing his sheep, and her friend Hira, the Adullamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance of NIV, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had not grown up. She had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face, not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law. And he went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll send you a young goat for my flock," he said. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your seal and its cord, and the staff in your hand," she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend, the Adullamite, in order to get his pledge back from the woman. But he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where's the shrine prostitute who was beside the road in Enamine?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So we went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." After 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law, Tamar, is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said, and she added, "See if you recognize whose steel and cord and staff these are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah, and he did not sleep with her again." When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it to his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she said, This is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was given the name Zerah, Joseph and Potiphar's wife. Genesis 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household. He entrusted to his care everything he owned, from the time he was put in charge of his household and of all that he owned. The Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well-built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he entrusts to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you. Because you are his wife, how then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me." But I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then he told him the story. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When it is... Jeez Louise, I didn't realize how long this was. Okay, that's not bad. Beside me and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me?" He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. When Joseph was in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Genesis 40. The cupbearer and the baker. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with the two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard. In the same prison where Joseph was confined, the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials, who were in custody with him, if his master's house, asked him in his master's house, "Why are you faces so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered. "There is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on that vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and clusters ripened in a grape. Pharaoh's cup was in my hands, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness, mention to the Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried out of the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. But the 3 birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for his officials. He lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer, the chief baker, in the presence of the officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so he once again put the cup into the Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Pharaoh's dreams. Genesis 41. When 2 years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came out of the Nile and stood beside those on the river bank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, and scorched by the east wind, the thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled. So he sent for all the magicians who were wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told him his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain guard. Each of us had a dream in the same night, and each dream had meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. He told him our dreams. He interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream, and the things turned out exactly as he predicted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before the Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you, that you can hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph replied to Pharaoh. But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream I was standing on the river bank of the Nile. When out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first, but even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dreams I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin. scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but none could explain this to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh that what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. In it, one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up after are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. So if, just as I said to Pharaoh, God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do, 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms of the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do so. Do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming up, store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh, to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in the reserve of the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine." The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and all his officials, so Pharaoh asked them, "Can anyone find anyone like this man, one whom is in the Spirit of God?" The Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne I will be greater than you." Joseph in charge of Egypt. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a golden chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as second in command, and men shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zephanath-Paneah, and gave him Asenath, daughter of Petupher, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph went out from Joseph's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all foods produced in the 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored them in the cities. In each city, he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Petupher, priest of On. Now Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, and said, "It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." The second son has named Ephraim, and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began. Sorry, guys. Just as Joseph had said, there were famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the world. And that's our readings for today. Where did I put this? That was a lot of reading, but I'm a bit of A little bit of a history buff. Wow, I think I did that pretty fast. Anyway, I'm a little bit of a history buff, so I really enjoy history, and this is history. This is true history. So yeah, what I can take out of this reading is, even when you're down, even when you're down on your luck, even when you're completely lost, God can make a way for you. Joseph was stripped of everything. He never did anything wrong to his brothers or to his father. Who was his father? Jacob. Yet his brothers sold him for $5, $5 USD, which is 20 shekels of silver, which is 8 ounces. I remember it all. And I think this is crazy because that's so cheap for your own brother, and he never did anything wrong to him, and they were gonna kill him until they saw the two merchants. So and then Joseph was a slave, and he still did nothing wrong. He was with God the whole time. And a woman lied about him and said that he tried to rape her. And then he was so down on his luck, but then God was with him when he was in prison, and then he was with him through everything. So what I want to say to you guys is, even when you're down on luck, there's still a way. There's always a way. So so let's pray. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, I pray that you can help us understand your teachings and understand what you are trying to teach us through them. I pray that you can help us through our daily lives and daily struggles, and through all of our lives, help us spread the gospel, Lord, and service you how you need. I pray that you can help us be like Joseph and not stray from your path, even when we are down on our luck, Lord. Pray that you help us, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Reading Genesis 42 through 45. Then Genesis 46 through 50. So we got 2 more days of Genesis until it will be added to... I always lose it. Where'd it go? Oh, will be added to the bookmark. This will be our second book. They're going to go all on here. See Job on there? Genesis is going to go somewhere random. I'm thinking put it right here. And then we're going to finish Exodus and all of this. So, I'll see you guys. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. I hope you guys have a great day. See y'all tomorrow. And I'm going to go to bed. Bye, guys.